Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the session. Thank you for registering for this session. We welcome you to the Expert Hour Masterclass in Cybersecurity. Today's Masterclass will be on the topic of cybersecurity. It's a field I believe we've only managed to scratch the surface. Before we start, I would like to go over the housekeeping rules. Uh, we'll start the session. We'll start the knowledge session shortly. Before that, we'll have a brief introduction to Education USA, and then we'll have the knowledge session, and we'll also have a segment called the US at the Frontier of Cybersecurity, and then we'll also have the Q&A segment. Now, to avoid any distractions, please keep your camera and mic muted. If you have any questions during the course of the presentation, please post those queries in the Q&A in the chat box. Your queries will be addressed by us and will be answered by the expert during the Q&A segment. We request you to sincerely keep the questions relevant to the session. If possible, use headphones for good audio quality. And during the course of the presentation, we'll be posting a lot of resources. Keep checking those, and I hope you have a fruitful session. Education USA is your official source on US higher education. We are supported by US Department of State. We aim to provide accurate, comprehensive, and current information. We have about 430 plus centers in 175 plus countries. In India, as on date, we have 4 centers with headquarters in New Delhi. How to stay connected with Education USA? You can follow us on our social media platforms. We are also active on YouTube, where you can check out more videos on Masterclass series and State Spotlight series, sports diplomacy, and so on and so forth. Keep checking with Education USA India and stay connected. Now, before I go on to the cybersecurity and before I bring on the speaker, now cybersecurity, we've grown up watching several movies and series where there is usually a computer genius doing a fast clickety clack of the computer keyboard and yells, "I'm in." From a simple Ferris Bueller trying to hack into his school system, changing his attendance records. Fast forward to one of those die-hard movies where a computer genius is trying to save the country and his fellow men from impending cyber security risks. We've seen it all, but there's always more. Cybersecurity is a vast field. I can keep going, but I believe you were all promised a masterclass in cybersecurity. With that, let me introduce the speaker. Dr. Nicole Beebe is the Dean of the College of Computing at IIT Chicago. She has 2 decades of experience in academia, preceded by several years in private industry and 12 years of service in the US Air Force. Her roles include Associate Vice President for Research Partnerships and Strategy, Assistant Vice President for Faculty Research Development, Director of the Cyber Center for Security and Analytics. Her research interests are cybersecurity, cyber analytics, and digital forensics with applications to insider threat detection and analysis, IoT security and forensics, and cyber threat hunting. She has published nearly 60 peer-reviewed articles in top journals and conferences that have been cited over 2,700 times. Her research has been funded by the National Science Foundation, the Department of Homeland Security, and several industry partners. And reiterating the housekeeping rules, please keep your mics muted. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box. We will address those queries in the during the Q&A segment. Over to you, Dr. Nicole.
Thank you. Good morning for those of you on this side of the globe. Good evening for those of you guys and my friends in India and other corners of the world. Good day to everybody in between. I truly am delighted to be here joining you and talking to you about cybersecurity through Education USA and appreciate the opportunity. Over the next 35 minutes, I hope to give you a broad but meaningful overview of the world of cybersecurity. not just as an academic subject, but really as one of the most consequential and opportunity-rich fields of the 21st century. It's an incredibly broad field. Depends on which analysis you look at or read, but there's over 30 different subdisciplines in cybersecurity that span technical, non-technical, legal, organizational, human, behavioral, just about every domain there is. One time I gave a talk to my daughter's school and I asked how many people were interested in cybersecurity, and almost no hands went up. And I had a puzzled look and I asked them why not. And they said, well, I'm interested in this and I'm interested in that. And I began to perceive how just about everything that they were interested in had a cybersecurity component or could have a cybersecurity component. So it's really truly a broad field. So whether you're interested in a degree in cybersecurity, a career in cybersecurity, or just really understanding the complex interconnected world that we live in today and how to keep it secure and how to keep yourself secure, I hope you'll find this talk in this session helpful. So before we really dive in, let's answer a big question. What is cybersecurity? At its fundamental core, cybersecurity is protecting systems and networks and data from digital attacks, unauthorized access, and damage. That's how most people describe it. But I actually like to add the word people. It's about protecting people as well. Maybe not the physical person, although that's changing too. Because if you think about the devices, pacemakers, diabetes regulators, these types of things, the things that you need to keep yourself safe, the interconnected world that we live in is so interconnected that if we don't protect systems, networks, and data, we're not going to protect ourselves. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish with cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So now let's take a look at the foundational framework that really every cybersecurity professional learns in some form or another at the pretty much the beginning of their foray into cybersecurity. CIA. We're not talking about the US Central Intelligence Agency. We're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These three pillars are the key things that we're trying to accomplish when we say maintaining cybersecurity of our systems, networks, and data. Confidentiality means that only authorized users can access information. For a second, think about your medical records. Those should be visible to you and your doctor and the nurses, medical staff, correct? But you don't want just any stranger to access your medical records, right? Think about the next time you connect to public Wi-Fi and your computer tells you, hey, warning, you're connecting to an insecure network. Yes, it probably is insecure. Yes, it probably is or could be hacked, but it's actually referring to confidentiality. It's saying that everything you're transmitting across this network right now is being transmitted in plain text, meaning somebody can eavesdrop and recreate that text, see what you're searching, see what you're Googling, see what you're looking at. I struggled with my kids to help them understand the importance of security with not connecting to public Wi-Fi without VPNs and other security measures. They didn't believe me. They said, Mom, you're just being paranoid because it's your job. And, yeah, okay, but it's true. And so I showed them. I said, okay, go ahead and surf the web. And I used, Wireshark and other open source tools to capture their network communication on that open Wi-Fi. And I recreated their web page and showed it to them. I said, this is what other people can see every single time you connect to public Wi-Fi. Your transmissions that you think are confidential are not confidential. That's what we're talking about with confidentiality. Integrity means that the data that you're actually looking at and transmitting and receiving is accurate, that it hasn't been tampered with. Some people refer to things like man-in-the-middle attacks, where somebody is sitting between the sender and the receiver and intercepting the traffic and potentially changing the traffic without you realizing it and then sending it on. Think of your financial transactions. Would you like somebody to take a zero away from that transfer that's coming into your bank account? Certainly not. You might like integrity in the other direction, right? A zero added, but I can assure you, your bank cares about that end of it and doesn't want a zero added. They want, and we want the integrity of our data to be maintained and not to be altered without our awareness or permission. Availability, that means the data and the systems and the networks are accessible when they're needed. Think about back to that medical example, the hospital's systems, which are increasingly data enabled, going dark in the middle of a surgery. Now that's a problem. Think about when you lose today, when you lose water, lose power in a storm. That's not a cyber event per se, I mean, from a standpoint of a malicious attack. But just think about how that impacts your life. Think about when you can't get your email. Think about when you don't have electricity. And if you realize how on the back end these water systems and power systems and all of our critical infrastructures are 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 data enabled and interconnected and controlled through operational and informational technology and require cyber infrastructure, cyber physical systems to run. And now if an attacker can get a hold of those systems and then maliciously take out your water and power and other critical things, that's a real problem. I remember back in a few years ago, the Colonial Pipeline was ransomwared, and it took down in the southeastern U.S. Gas stations for days. It was a big deal. People couldn't fuel up their tanks to get to work. Why does all this matter? Just the things at the top, right? There's thousands of cyber attacks every single day, and this number is probably low in my opinion. The impact of these attacks is trillions. It's measured in the trillions of dollars every year. And honestly, 95% of the breaches trace back to some form of human error, which is why this education and awareness is really our most powerful tool. And then beyond the CIA triad, at the bottom, I wrote plus non-repudiation and authentication and authorization. Those are a couple other framework principles in cybersecurity that we're always trying to maintain. Non-repudiation means in ensuring that someone can't deny an action they took. Amazon wouldn't want a buyer to buy something, receive something, and then repudiate, say, I didn't buy that. And deny the financial transaction. Of course, there's checks and balances to make sure they get their money. But the point is we want to make sure that people are held accountable for actions they take on these systems and networks. And authentication and authorization refer to really verifying the identity and controlling access. Am I who I say I am? When Nicole Beebe logs in, is it really me? And then when I do log in, even though I have access to a system, am I authorized to do certain things on that system? I'm not authorized to gain HR type information on every employee at Illinois Tech, but I am authorized to see certain information about my particular employees or our students that are in my college, but maybe not another college. Like, what do I have authorization to actually access? And so those are some of the key fundamentals of what we're trying to accomplish in cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So now the next question is, okay, that's the what, but from who? What are the threats? Who are we trying to protect our networks and systems and data from with regard to confidentiality, integrity, and availability? So I really want to talk to you now about the threat landscape. And terms get a little mixed up in this field. People talk about vulnerabilities and threats interchangeably. I get a little parochial about that. The threat is really the who, the threat actor, the person behind the computer on the other end who's going to take advantage of and exploit a vulnerability, a weakness in the system, whether that weakness is an unpatched or misconfigured system, or whether that weakness, to be perfectly frank, as we said, 95% of the time, is a human, a developer, programmer, a user, an administrator, somebody. But the threat is the bad actor on the other side of the line that's going to exploit a vulnerability and take advantage of a vulnerability. And so there's really four categories of threat actors. And these are just broad classes that you see at the bottom. The first is nation states. These are some of the most devastating threats in the sense that they are well-resourced, sophisticated, patient, usually have a long-term strategic goal. And when they do things tactically, they're very, very, very impactful. Impactful on targets like electrical grids, election infrastructures, military intelligence, our way of life, things like that. A couple of examples, and I'm going to use a couple of data examples because this is a very sensitive topic area. And so I just want to mention two examples that have been publicly acknowledged. And it actually might surprise you how far back it goes. And it actually really goes back further than this. But the Russian cyber attacks of the Ukrainian power grid of 2015 was really the first publicly acknowledged power grid attack, took down nearly 250,000 customers. And incidentally, it started with a phish. that unleashed malware. And we'll talk about phishing a little bit later. The WannaCry ransomware virus in 2017 that was attributed in North Korea, it crippled thousands of systems, including the UK's National Health Service. And those are just a couple examples. You can Google a lot more than that, but be careful what unverified facts of what is and what is not a nation state attack. Cyber criminals is the next category. They're typically motivated by money or facilitating criminal activity. Ransomware attacks are a really good example here, although ransomware as a tactic can be used by any category of cyber threat actor. But largely, ransomware attacks are a key mechanism by cyber criminals. Cyber criminals are trying to gain money. They may use ransomware, which is to encrypt your system and then demand a ransom. And then if you pay the ransom, they say that they will decrypt their computer. These things it's really a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's a really big deal. It's a really lucrative market. There have been some studies to show, in fact, which is disturbing and bothersome in many ways, but it's such a big market that they have customer service. And in fact, some studies have shown that the customer service on the dark web used by cyber criminals is better than what the rest of us have to deal with. So that's an interesting situation. It's that big of a market. And the next category is insider threats. Those come from within an organization, employees who intentionally or unintentionally compromise the security of the organization through a variety of different mechanisms. One of the most widely known globally insider threat cases as of late is Edward Snowden. He was a National Security Agency employee in the US and leaked thousands of classified documents to the press, is believed to have obtained many, many more than that. But that's an example of a malicious, volitional insider. And we need not get into the political or ideological debate on whether that was a righteous or an unrighteous act and the motivations behind it. But the point is undeniable that it was contrary to the objectives of the organization, that the organization didn't want their employee to do that. And so a malicious volitional insider is doing something for their own gain or for a specific reason or against their employer, and they know what they're doing to sabotage or commit fraud, exfiltrate data, et cetera, from the organization. And when people think of insider threats, that's often all they think about. But there's a couple other categories of insider threats that are really just as dangerous, in some ways, if not more so, because they're so much more common and prevalent. And the first category is policy violators, people who are knowingly going against the security rules, honestly, usually to get the job done, to get it done better, faster, smarter, et cetera, but they're compromising the security of the system to do it. And that's a problem. And oftentimes, these folks don't realize the security vulnerability that they're opening up when they do so just to get their job done. And the third category is kind of poor hygiene. And these are just normal everyday users who aren't knowingly violating policy, who aren't trying to do anything bad to their organization, but without realizing it, they're putting their organization at risk by clicking on links in emails that are phishes, visiting bad websites that get the malware downloaded to your system, falling victim to social engineering attacks. These kinds of poor cyber hygiene environments in the workplace are extremely impactful to organizations. And the last category is hacktivism. This used to be one of the bigger categories back in the 90s and maybe early 2000s when we would see website defacements by ideological groups that didn't agree with something, and they would deface a website and haha, you were hacked. And I think a lot of us in the industry, boy, that would be nice, honestly, just to go back to those days where the stakes weren't quite so large. Frankly, hacktivists, don't get me wrong, can wreak some serious havoc on organizations, but usually this is not as impactful to organizations and our way of life as many others. So to defend all of these, next slide, please. We really need. I'm sorry, I didn't finish this prior slide. Is the NIST framework. So I'm just going to mention the NIST framework. The NIST framework here has 5 different categories, and these are actually quite complex. I can't really get into the detail. We could talk about each of these a little bit more in the Q&A session if you want, but looking at the clock, I need to move along. But these are not as simple This is a global framework that is used worldwide to handle cybersecurity. We need to identify our assets and risks and vulnerabilities. Not as easy as one might think. Happy to talk to you about further why that's a challenging topic. Then it's a matter of protecting it. Also not an easy topic. We don't have all of the money and the resources in the world. Most organizations, all organizations don't. So we have to selectively determine, what the risks are and what security safeguards can be in place to handle the most important risks, et cetera. Then once we do that, there is no system except maybe a computer that's not connected to the internet, maybe buried in a hole and actually not used, which therefore is not useful. But that might be the only safe computer. And so really, even when you do all of the things in those first two domains, identify and protect, there's still going to be weaknesses and vulnerabilities exploited. So then you have to detect incidents. And here's where the field really struggles. We're getting better, but oftentimes hacks and intrusions will go on for months, if not years, before they're detected. And so a lot of damage is done in that meantime. Once it's detected, then we have the complex case of containing and mitigating the threat, getting them, containing the threat, stopping the bleeding, if you will, containing the damage, repairing the systems, recovering, and hopefully learning from the situation so we can keep it from happening again. The URL on the top left, and if somebody wants to put that in the chat, is a great resource. This particular URL provides an interactive website and framework for the domains, the jobs, and the skill sets that are relevant to this particular cybersecurity framework. It can really help a lot of you guys understand maybe what area of cybersecurity might be of most interest to you, and then help you understand kind of what skills you need for that area. But if you go there, don't be alarmed. The knowledge and skill set list is extremely long for every job. Don't let that scare you away. This is a journey that we're all on in careers of cybersecurity. Okay, next slide, please. So then next, the issue of cloud. This is more, we've talked about the what we're trying to do. We're talking about who we're trying to protect it from, and how and what a framework is. Now we need to move into the operating environment in which that defensive framework is applied. The cloud has truly transformed computing, and with it, its attack surface. What do I mean by attack surface? If you want to break into my house, you might think, oh, I'll break in through the front door. But wait, there's a back door. Oh, wait, there's a patio door. Oh, there's also windows. Oh, hey, what about the garage? A lot of people leave the door between the garage and the house unlocked. And so if I can just get into the garage, then I can get into the house. See, so an attack surface is the many different ways a person could attack a vulnerability and get into whatever it is they're trying to get into. And the cloud has truly transformed that attack surface, and really almost every organization, and including yourself, including your cell phone, are all interconnected with the cloud. What is the cloud? The cloud is just a term that's used for dislocated servers, data centers, web-based, internet-based software applications. In other words, you operating on a computer, and I'm going to use air quotes for that, that is not completely in your possession, that the data is being sent to and from some other computer in some other location. And why I used air quotes when I said computer is we also need to begin to change our viewpoint of what a computer is. It's not just this laptop. It is my cell phone. It is potentially my washing machine, my dishwasher, my refrigerator, my Nest thermostat, my Ring doorbell, my whatever, all the interconnected billions and billions of devices that are now known as the Internet of Technology, meaning all this technology is computer enabled and interconnected on the network, and therefore in and of itself is a computer. And so all of that really represents, in a way, the cloud. So there's really kind of three or four dominant risks that you should be aware of when it comes to cloud security. Misconfiguration, if the human weakness is one of the biggest weaknesses in the general category of cybersecurity, misconfigured systems is really, from a technical perspective, which again goes back to human, and obviously because humans are configuring it, at least for now, one of the number one sources of cloud breaches. They're responsible 90% of the incidents, whether that's open storage buckets, misconfigured firewalls, exposed APIs, these aren't particularly sophisticated attacks. We have scanners that can scan for what services are running on certain devices, what versions of those services, have they been patched? Oh, you're running this particular service and it hasn't been patched? Great, I can exploit that. In other words, as a hacker comes to a system, again, back to that house analogy, they don't need the front door to be weak or unlocked. If they can just find one window that wasn't locked properly, they can get in that way, or a weak window that they can break. That's a misconfiguration of a system. An insecure API, we love APIs, application program interfaces. Just as it sounds, an application program interface, an API is a way that one application interfaces with another system or program. It's a way in the cloud that computers and systems talk to each other, and by that reason, because it's used to serve data, um, if they're not properly secured, it's a really big deal. If the API itself has weak authentication, if it's completely open and exposed, if it's not checking the input and the output, the object authorization checks that are in place aren't right, if it has bad data response protocols, oh, hey, you wanted that cell. I've got the API telling me to get this cell of this field of the database, but my system is programmed to say, oh, okay, well, here's the cell and here's the entire sheet or row or field that goes with it. That's an improper response. You only asked for the cell, but I gave you the whole sheet. If a API doesn't have proper rate limiting, you can have denial of service attacks. The list goes on and on and on. They all become open doors if they're misconfigured and or designed insecurely. Privilege escalation is part and parcel to the tactics, techniques, and procedures that hackers use to get into systems. If they just can just get it, get their foot in the door, and then with a user level access, and then exploit some vulnerability to then get administrator or root level access. This is gold. And supply chain is an increasingly huge attack. SolarWinds is a great example of a supply chain, a very impactful supply chain attack, wherein SolarWinds it actually still is a company, recovered, and they've been bought out by another company. But they were at the time a huge provider of network management tools for the US government. And so a hacker entity basically compromised the network management tool itself that then the US federal agencies purchased, and that provided backdoors into then the federal agencies. And so that's a supply chain example. If the federal agencies are buying these network management tools that happen to be compromised, then that's a supply chain risk. We have a shared responsibility model. The cloud provider is responsible for certain things. The customer is responsible for certain things. This is a problem. If you think of the old adage that the chain can be broken by its weakest link, if you think about customers and people and their own personal hygiene, and again, 95% of the attacks happen to do with weaknesses in people and misconfigured systems. Well, now you think about all of us sharing the cloud. And then the fact that there's a shared responsibility model, and if my stuff is vulnerable inside that cloud, am I then posing a risk to others? The case study at the bottom, the Capital One breach, is an interesting example. In 2019, where there was a misconfigured AWS firewall, web application firewall, that exposed over 100 million customer records, Capital One records. And so really the cloud, there's really specific security and a shared responsibility model. But herein lies kind of the problem. This model has traditionally relied on a perimeter defense model. If you'll go to the next slide, please. The perimeter defense model is how we've always approached cybersecurity. There's the untrusted and the trusted, and we have a firewall in between. And so if we can just keep that firewall and that perimeter secure, then we can be trusted inside the network. Again, going back to misconfigurations, going back to the human vulnerability, there really is nothing that is truly secure. And so having that perimeter defense mentality is really quite risky. As soon as somebody gets in, so somebody's social engineered, or they exploit a vulnerability in that perimeter of the trusted zone, now they've got the keys to the kingdom and can do whatever they want. I always like to use a candy bar analogy that has a a crispy, yummy outside and then a soft, chewy inside. Once you get into that middle and that soft, chewy inside, everything is vulnerable from there. So one of the most important advancements in recent time is the zero trust model. And the zero trust model is basically says is we're not going to have a trusted zone anymore. There is no trusted zone. We're gonna verify everything. Um, we're going to verify users in every device, not just once, but continuously. We're going to apply least privilege access. Just because you can access something doesn't mean you should access it. And if you should, what's the minimum amount you access you need and nothing more? We're going to constantly presume, which by the way, I think most providers of any kind of services should always assume that they're already breached. If you manage your network and your system in a way presuming there's already a hacker inside, you would behave more differently. You would encrypt things you wouldn't have encrypted before. You would check things that you wouldn't check before. Microsegmentation is one of the most important pillars of the zero trust model, and that basically it divides your network. A lot of people are familiar with VLANs, virtual local area networks, which is a kind of a using software-defined networking mechanism to segment a network. And so, okay, so maybe a hacker gets into this portion of my network. The VLAN will keep them, at least to some extent, from getting into other areas of the network. But the problem is it's not granular enough. So microsegmentation is a way to divide your systems and your networks at a much, much, much lower granularity level and kind of in a functional level. So you can segment applications, you can segment virtual machines, you can segment users, you can segment data, you can segment areas of the network, you can segment in a much smaller way and on kind of different roles or rule bases. In theory, it's here. In 2021 in the United States, there was an executive order that mandated all U.S. federal agencies to employ zero trust, and so we're secure, right? No, we're all still struggling with really how to do this holistically. We employ mechanisms of zero trust, but really not purely and holistically. And then even when you employ zero trust, you've got policy engines and zero trust technologies that those you now have to protect. This is where we're at now, but we're still trying to improve. Next slide, please. Um, to help with this challenging environment, we've got AI. AI is super important, and this slide that I'm going to kind of go through pretty quick is something we've been doing for years, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm going to talk about AI a little bit more later. The traditional use of AI in cybersecurity has been to use AI-driven threat detection. In other words, one of the biggest challenges with cybersecurity and detection is the volume of connections and data traversing the network and the internet is so large that you're really trying to detect a needle in a haystack, or the anomaly that you're trying to detect is in the range of parts per billion. And so it's hard for a human to see patterns that are that hidden, to react quickly enough. And so AI has been used for years in cybersecurity to help us with threat detection. We take raw data, we extract features, we create a machine learning model that can classify, is this good, is this bad? We use AI to determine a quantitative threat score that can help our security and network defenders to determine what to look at and what kind of priority stack order. It can also then inform like SOAR systems, security orchestration automation engines, response engines to block or alert or quarantine until a human can look at it. We've used AI to help with things like to use graph neural networks that can help us detect lateral movement that maybe a person can't see, that can use natural language processing to determine that something is a phish, using user entity and behavior analytics to detect when, say, Nicole typically goes to the office during these hours and she's usually logging in from these locations. Well, hey, why didn't Nicole log in last night at 3 a.m. from Melbourne, Australia, when she was just in Chicago 3 hours ago, right? That's like an anomaly that a system can very easily detect in an automated way. So this is kind of, I would say good, but a little old school of how we've used AI, and I'll talk about AI a little bit more in a minute or so. And so really the bottom line is AI is a tool in our arsenal. It's helping elevate our capabilities, but I want you to think about AI from the other side of the equation. It's not only giving our network defenders superpowers, it's giving our attackers superpowers too. And so really the cat and mouse game, the attack and defend back and forth challenge that we have, AI is just making that easier in some ways and harder in some ways. It's really accelerating everything that we do. Okay, next slide, please. Mentioning phishing really quick. Phishing has been around, since cyber attacks began. They've evolved over the years. Why is phishing still? I mean, it seems like such a basic thing where you're sending an email to somebody and getting them to do something, click on a leak, log it quick, your account's been compromised, or you're running out of time. If you don't fix this thing or register for this thing, you're gonna lose all your money, lose your job, whatever. Create some sense of urgency and get people to, or just trick them to get them to click on a link, download a thing, enter their credentials. It's just good old-fashioned social engineering. It's not particularly technical. In the old days, it was about volume, just sending enough fishes out that somebody would click on something. Then it evolved in the 2010s to spear phishing, so it would target me in particular, maybe send an email that seemed to be from a coworker, my boss, etc. Whaling then was an evolution to specifically target C-suite executives. That's kind of a joke to say, going after the big fish, the whale. That's where that term comes from. And now we have AI phishing. Phishing used to be easier to detect. We would educate users. Hey, look at the grammar. Look at the exigency, the sense of urgency to respond to this email. You would train your users to look for certain tells, and that's how you would tell users to detect a fish. But now with AI has made the phishing, the actual fish emails themselves, just amazingly beautiful. I mean, respectfully beautiful, scaringly beautiful, and hard for users to detect that it's a fish. And this is one of the most prevalent mechanisms that hackers will use to gain access to a network. And so it's a really big deal. And on the right, you see some mechanisms for helping us deal with some of these things. In the interest of time, I'm gonna just leave these as for your reference. But these are some of the mechanisms that the field has been using to share and advance and utilize and implement threat intelligence to help us take away and advance in this arms race, take away knowledge of what the threats are and detect against them. Next slide, please. So now I want to take a minute and kind of talk about the future. This is, I don't want to make this a scary thing. It's not meant to be scary. It's meant to really highlight the importance of cybersecurity in the evolving technological frontier, the quickly evolving evolution of technology that we deal with. The half-life for any technology is getting increasingly short. And so cybersecurity is an ever-changing field that has a lot of challenges, and with every new technology, those challenges increase. Quantum, I have a real penchant to talk about quantum and quantum security because I think it's a real threat, but I feel like we're missing two-thirds of the equation. Everybody's talking about quantum cybersecurity, the fact that our traditional cryptography and our encrypted documents that we have right now will be vulnerable and hacked in a post-quantum world because the quantum systems will be able to crack that encryption quickly. Yes, real threat. However, it's not the world is ending from the standpoint of we've got quantum key distribution, QKD technology, quantum key distribution technology that is evolving quite rapidly. We've had lots of proofs. It's actually in use in some places. It's helpful because it's a mechanism to distribute keys that are more resilient in a post-quantum era and in a much more foolproof, robust manner. Just if you're familiar with quantum technology, the actual event of measurement which is when you're reading the data, actually changes the quantum state. And so it's a lot more tamper-proof, if you will, from the standpoint of transmitting those keys. So that's one reason why we don't have to be completely scared. On the other hand, there's a lot of threats that are doing a harvest now, decrypt later. Let me just hack into systems and gain as much encrypted information as I possibly can so that when I have quantum technology available to me, I can then decrypt that stuff. And so that is a real threat. But there's two other areas that I feel like we're under addressing when it comes to quantum cybersecurity. One is the classical quantum system interface. A lot of technologies that we've seen exploited in our critical infrastructures have to do with the IT/OT interface, information technology, my computer, my normal internet stuff, and operational technology, those computer systems that are controlling the power plant, that are controlling the water systems. And when we connect IT systems to OT systems, that interface creates a significant vulnerability that has not historically been properly secured. And it provides a mechanism into OT through IT that's insecure. The same thing, in my opinion, is going to happen with classical systems and quantum systems. Quantum systems are not, in my opinion, going to replace all systems. There's certain things that classical computers are better at than quantum computers. And so we're going to have hybrid environments. We're also going to have classical systems uploading jobs to and receiving data from quantum systems that are in the cloud. Again, that interface is going to be extremely important to secure. And I don't think people are talking about that enough. I also don't think we're talking about actually developing secure quantum systems themselves. One of the problems that we've always had in cybersecurity is that we design computers to do things and to work. And time to market is a real thing in business. And so if I'm going to slow down and make sure I design something more securely, I might get beat out by my competitor who brings something to market faster. And so everybody right now is really rushing to develop stable quantum systems, and I'm not convinced that we're spending enough time talking about designing secure from the start quantum systems. So hopefully that opened up your perspective a little bit about the role of cybersecurity and quantum. AI and LLM security, super big deal. I don't think people think about what the vulnerabilities of AI itself are, what the vulnerabilities of LLMs are. If you think about the fact that AI is predicting things, if you think about just the acronym Chat GPT, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer Networks systems. That pre-trained part means there's some model that the AI is using to predict to do. If I can compromise that model without you realizing it, I have now compromised your AI. If I can instruct your LLM to do things through prompt injection attacks that it's not supposed to do, we're doing a much better job with creating LLMs with guardrails, quote unquote, guardrails that guard what it can and cannot do. But if I can compromise and tell the LLM to do something different and it does it, then that's compromised. And we could talk about some more examples of those attacks in Q&A if you're interested. Critical infrastructure, super big deal. Transportation, power, water, all these different things that matter to us in our way of life, our economic security, our national security, our health, our hospitals, et cetera. Critical infrastructure is a really, really, really big deal. And these systems are computer-based. They're networked. They're interconnected. And so one of the easiest ways to attack a critical infrastructure and really make a significant disruption in a military operation, civil, our way of life is a cyber attack. And so protecting cyber physical systems is critical. And then, digital identity, we're struggling, we're trying to move toward more passwordless authentication. But people, we humans are resisting these things. Passwords are notoriously weak, honestly, because of how we use them. If you tell me I have to have an 8-character 16 character, special characters, upper, lower numbers, et cetera, how many users start writing it down, putting it in a notepad, putting it on their cell phone, et cetera. And so we've been trying to move to passwordless mechanisms for authentication, but it really takes adoption, willingness by people to do so. Um, Again, I already talked about secure by design. We need to design systems securely from the beginning. And I really kind of already talked about that cyber physical system convergence a few times. So next slide, please. The US. The US really has been at the frontier and really guiding cybersecurity around the world. I say that a little bit biased, of course. I got into this field in the 1990s through the US Air Force. Think about that, 1990s. That was quite some time ago, though I don't like to say that. Um, but the Air Force really at the time was kind of really leading the way as far as securing systems, detection. We had the Air Force Computer Emergency Response Team that really predated, fill in the blank, all of the rest. We really have been at this for quite some time, and I think that's one of the reasons why U.S. has been kind of a leader in this space. Next slide, please. It's evidenced by the fact that we invest billions of dollars every year in federal R&D. We have wonderful world-class agencies, the National Science Foundation and the Defense Department of Advanced Research Projects Agency. Here's a little quick little example. Google the videos for this if you're interested. It's really quite cool. Back in 2017, DARPA had a grand challenge, and that grand challenge was autonomous network attack and system defense. Think about that. We think AI just came about in the last few years, right? But in 2017 in Las Vegas, there was this really cool competition, frankly, where individuals and organizations demonstrated autonomous attack and defend cyber capabilities. Basically 10 years ago, which is pretty cool. We have amazing industry partnerships, obviously some giants in the global market as far as AI, cybersecurity, cloud-based systems, and computer technology. And we have national centers of gravity in our national labs. We have the National Institute for Standards of Technology that creates a lot of our regulations and standards and protocols and policies. We have the U.S. Cyber Command. So we really just have a lot of capability U.S. has poured into cybersecurity. So I'm pretty proud to say that I think we're at the frontier. Obviously, I'm also biased at my own organization, Illinois Tech University, in Chicago, Illinois, increasingly global. Spoiler alert, which everybody I hope on this call knows, we're opening up a campus first in India to get authorization, first U.S. institution to get authorization to operate a branch campus in India. So we're opening up a branch campus in Mumbai starting in the fall. Our cybersecurity programs, we've been recognized as the National Center for Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense Education. We have multiple degrees and tracks. As I mentioned, hope I've instilled in you that cybersecurity is a very interdisciplinary field, and our degrees reflect that. Our bachelor's degree and master's degree have multiple tracks, so you can go technical, non-technical, engineering, law, policy, digital forensics, the works. And so depending on, whatever your interest is in cybersecurity, I think we have that covered. Next slide, please. Um, Next slide, please. Yes. Okay. What are you going to need in the future? I've kind of talked about a lot of this. You don't worry, you don't need to know all and everything about all of these fields. But you need to have some technical skills and understanding of some of this technology. You need to have analytical skills increasingly to be able to operate in this data-rich environment of respond and detect. And it really is interdisciplinary. You're not going to sit in a server closet with your hoodie on and sit at a keyboard and only do technical stuff all day long. You're going to have to work with other departments because it's not just a technical challenge. You have to deal with the human component and the organizational component. Next slide. So how do you get started? There's lots of ways you can get started. Certifications are great. These are some that I recommend. CompTIA, and it has Security Plus, A Plus, Network Plus. Those are really basic entry level certifications that kind of can ensure you have some of the foundations. ISC Squared has cybersecurity specific certifications. CEH stands for Certified Ethical Hacker, emphasis on the ethical, et cetera. There's just a lot of certifications you can go for and get really smart for low cost. SANS is a wonderful resource. They have an open source SANS reading room. People who are GIAC certified have to do publications, and so the reading room is really rich. and open source to learn and get smart on a lot of different things. The certifications are outstanding. The boot camps are amazing, though costly. So depending on your budget, this is a great resource. Then practice, try, play, but do so in a safe environment. So online CTF environments are great because they provide you kind of challenges in a controlled and protective environment that you can engage in CTFs and kind of test your mettle, if you will. But don't get discouraged because these are challenging and some are harder than others. Just keep playing. Organizations, get connected, talk to people, get mentors. These are some great organizations that have global presence that you might be interested in. And fundamentally, just, learn the basics. Not all the basics, but get familiar. I guess my point is if you're in, for example, if you're in high school and your school doesn't have a cybersecurity course, that's okay. Because honestly, what you can learn in a basic computer science course or basic information technology course is critically important because it's hard to defend technology that you don't understand. And so really getting some of the basics of these areas is super important. Again, at the end of the day, don't get overwhelmed. This is a huge field. I've been in it for about 30 years. I certainly don't know everything. And any one discipline, probably, much less the 30 plus disciplines. Yeah, you have to keep up and be smart and learn a lot of different things, but nobody knows all of this stuff. You tend to need to get a breadth of knowledge, and then you'll tend to specialize in a particular area. And so don't be overwhelmed as you get in this space. Okay, I think that wraps it up. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nicole, for that wonderful knowledge session. And saying it was definitely insightful, and I hope all the attendees over here found that useful. So we move to the Q&A session, and this will be moderated by my colleague, Ms. Elizabeth. Elizabeth, over to you.
We do have a couple of questions from students. The first one is, does protecting from attack means attacks intentionally made by hacker or attacks occurred by any software or hardware malfunction of the device?
Oh, that's a fabulous and very insightful question. Answer E, all of the above. It's truly you have to defend against all of it. You're right. I probably did focus this talk a lot more about the people trying to do things maliciously, but cybersecurity and patching things to make sure that things work. Let's go back to the and sorry for any companies that I share examples for that makes them uncomfortable, but think about the CrowdStrike global attack that wasn't a malicious attack whatsoever. And it was a misalignment between CrowdStrike's technology and Microsoft's technology. And that gives to, I think I had on one slide, I didn't go into it, DevSecOps, right? DevOps, developmental operations, right? How do you test and make sure that these systems work together, that latest patch doesn't break something? And so yes, it includes non-people elements as well. That's a great question.
Moving on, do you have any tips for travelers that can be used when using any free internet worldwide to secure their confidential information and money transaction?
3 letters, VPN, virtual private network. Find some good VPN software. And no, I'm not going to recommend specific ones because then I'll probably get in trouble by somebody who said you recommended somebody else's over somebody else's. I'll tell you what I'm a big fan of is CNET, C Charlie, N November, E Echo, T technology. CNET. CNET is a organization that does a lot of reviews. And so if you just, hey, CNET, what's your latest review of VPNs for Macs, for Windows, for whatever, and get and install, and it is worth the money, although there are free ones, VPN technology. And get one, by the way, that disables your communications on your system because your VPN connectivity and your internet connectivity drops and fades depending on, the signal. And you want to make sure that it connects into and by the way, your phone and your laptop and all your devices that are talking, VPN technology, you want it to shut down the communication on that device until the VPN is connected, then it opens. If it loses its VPN connection, it shuts down connectivity again. So just please use a VPN, a good one.
Okay, the next question. If an attack happens, then what kind of evidence shall be collected by the victim and given
Oh,
to the cybersecurity team as a complaint and seek for compensation?
oh, that last part of the question. That's okay. I was in love with the first part of your question because my first love in cybersecurity and how I got into this field is digital forensics. And digital forensics is all about the forensic discovering, cataloging, explaining what happened on machines, on networks through the collection of forensic traces. And so you kind of had a two-part question there, right? Your first part of the question was what forensic stuff needs to be collected. And then I think the second part of the question is so that you can get remuneration or something if something went wrong, right?
Yes.
Um, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to bias my question a little bit more to the front end. Um, the biggest thing is understand from a forensics perspective, just like, okay, go back to all I love that Arvin started with the movies. Go back to all the crime scene movies and shows that you watch and how when there's a crime scene, they put the little footies on their shoes and they put the hairnet on to make sure that my hair doesn't fall in the crime scene and contaminate the crime scene. Same thing with computers. Don't contaminate the crime scene. Know that every single thing you do, just turning the machine on, frankly, can change the state and the evidence. And a lot of data on a machine is transient in nature, what's in memory, what's cached, et cetera. And so when you do things, you might be overwriting temporary buffers where your evidence was. And so if you really want to trace something back and attribute something to a bad actor, you need to minimize your footprint on a machine and make sure that you're preserving the crime scene. The second part of your question, that's a little bit harder to answer because it depends on the nature of the situation. Honestly, a lot of entities, if we're talking about my data being compromised, a lot of entities protect by giving you credit monitoring and these types of services. And so and then, there's lawyers that can get involved here in the middle to help you if your remuneration that you need is more than just monitoring a long-term impact from potential identity theft. So I'm not sure if I answered that second part of the question particularly well, but that'd be my advice.
For a fresher, other than the basic cybersecurity knowledge, what field should one look into and focus as there are 30 plus subdomains in this field?
So you're asking which one I would recommend people focus on?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the answer you want because I'm gonna say I think it's about what you're interested in and where your particular skills lie. There are jobs in all of these areas, and to me, and well-paying jobs in all of these areas. And so in the area and the field changes so much, it's a hard field to keep up with. And so you want to be in an area that you're passionate about. If you're passionate about policy, go that area. If you're passionate about, you want to be the person with the flyaway kit who hops on a plane and responds to an incident, then go there. So it really just depends on what your skill sets are and where your passions lie, and that's where you should start. And I think most people in cybersecurity, very few of us stay in one area. You tend to move around and learn different things and have different aspects to your career.
Okay, moving on. What are the different models used for AI-driven threat detection?
The different models for AI threat detection,
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that question. Because when I think AI models, I'm thinking of specific trained models that would predict a certain thing. I mean, you've got AI models in the general class sense that are detecting is something a phishing or not, is something malware or not. We've got AI models that are more anomaly detection based that are meant to detect anomalous activity. Like I don't normally see network traffic of this type at this time from this place, et cetera, et cetera. You have AI being used for autonomous response. And so, hey, I detected a threat. I'm going to automatically quarantine. I'm going to automatically add a firewall rule, et cetera. And so I don't know what to mean by models. I think of it as more like a role. AI is being used. AI is also being used to efficiently sift through data, that type of thing. I've used AI a lot in my area of forensics and insider. A lot of insider threat detection um, is rule based and heuristic based. And or it's completely very laborious user activity monitoring based. Well, these are challenges. You can use AI to use kind of forensic signals to detect behavior that violate rules. And so you can use AI to kind of meld areas. So there's just a lot of different roles. I'd say roles that AI is being used.
Okay, moving on. Recently, there have been various cases in India related to cyber arrest or digital arrest. Usually, people out of fear fall into this trap and lose all their money. But what can we do to save ourselves or avoid such situations from ever happening?
I assume by that question we're referring to being tricked,
The scams,
to
I believe
the
that's
scams. Yeah, yeah.
referring to the scam.
Okay, so the biggest thing, never fall victim to urgency. Trust but verify. If somebody calls you, you know, there's one time I had a situation with a surgical procedure and they needed to verify a bunch of stuff before the surgical procedure, and I wouldn't answer their questions because they called me and I said, I need to call you back. And I'm not going to just take the number you give me because you may just set that up. Like verify and make sure you're the one initiating a conversation. Make sure you're calling a trusted number. So be careful of urgency, verify sources, double check that, somebody is legitimate and asking for things. Deep fakes are an increasingly big deal. Like it's very easy, frankly, to create a deep fake of me and now you trust me, but you're really not talking to me. So a lot of people are kind of working on things like developing code words. I've told my dad, who's elderly, like dad, we have a code word. And so if somebody ever sounding like me and looking like me asks you to transfer money, I need you to ask for our code word. So those are just a couple of helpful tricks.
So I can see, I know that there are more questions coming our way, but it's almost time to wrap up. The students can definitely send your questions. The email addresses are given on the screen. We have the email address of our professor and as well as Education USA email addresses there on your screen. Please do send your questions our way and we'll definitely respond to those queries. Now over to Arvind.
Thank you, and a big thanks to Dr. Nicole Beebe for doing this and for agreeing to do this masterclass in cybersecurity. I know we had a lot of back and forth communication, and there was a beautiful presentation that you all just saw that has been set up. This has been incredibly insightful, not just for the attendees here, but also for me and for my colleague Elizabeth. Like Elizabeth mentioned, please do send in your queries. And those of you who are interested in more masterclasses, masterclass series like this, do write to India at educationusa.org. You can also visit our website, educationusa.in. And our WhatsApp number is also over there, +91 74289 32225. It's also available on, we are also reachable on WhatsApp. Um, for any queries pertaining to this particular session, Dr. BB's email ID is over there on the screen. You can definitely make note of this. This video will be soon cleaned up and uploaded on our YouTube channel. Thank you once again, and good evening to one and all, and have a wonderful weekend in advance.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you can stop the recording.